we've seen this story before with a new coach coming to the Cowboys, a talented team, and how far can they go?
JB, you've been around this preseason. You've had talks with Patrick Mahomes. You've had talks with Jerry Jones. But let's start there in Dallas, where things seem to be hitting DEFCON 1 between Jerry Jones and Micah Parsons. Can you talk a little bit and speak to Jerry Jones's mindset and maybe if Cowboys fans should be worried or not worried when it comes to the contract negotiations right now?
We know it's football season when the Cowboys have some drama. And we know the Cowboys have some drama when there are big-time players that need to be signed to contract extension. I mean, go figure this whole thing. A franchise that is starving to get back on a championship level, and it's always the same thing, one after another. One of the things that Jerry Jones said to me that just really kind of underscored the tone of these negotiations is when he started talking about the fact that there's still a possibility that the Cowboys will use a franchise tag on Micah Parsons. I know that's the last thing Micah Parsons wants to hear, but if you look back at Dak Prescott, that's how Dak Prescott really got to be the highest paid player in the NFL at $60 million a year. Did a franchise tag, and then they did another tag, which they ended up erasing and getting the deal done. But I think this thing is going to go on for a while. And whether or not they'll trade him, I guess it depends on, who calls the Cowboys and makes them an offer that they can't refuse.
What were the vibes around camp? We saw teammates, we saw CeeDee Lamb take to social media to defend Parsons and some others. So just tell us what were the feelings like? Was there a lot of dissension there in camp with teammates around, Jerry and Stephen Jones? And just give us a little peek into that.
Yeah, no, great question, because I definitely talked to several other players just to kind of get their take, and obviously 100% supporting Micah. And Micah Parsons, really, when you talk about a good faith effort on his part, showed up at camp. He's been doing conditioning. He's on the sidelines and the biggest cheerleader that you hear out there on the practice field. And when Tyler Guyton got hurt, the former first-round pick who, hurt his knee last week in camp, there was Micah Parsons out there on his knee with the trainers trying to help or at least kind of calm the player's nerve. I mean, I thought that was, a really, pretty cool moment of camaraderie from one teammate to the next. And the trainers are helping Guyton off the field. And there's Micah Parsons right alongside with him with Guyton on his shoulder. That being said, the comments by Jerry Jones about the injury risk, that did not go over well. I think the Cowboys players, and Dak Prescott told me this specifically, he said, this is still a business, and it's business first, and we understand it. And CeeDee Lamb talked about the fact that it's a business, and we know that it's going to get resolved ultimately at some point. So I think that's one lens that the Cowboys players see this through. But, it's fair to wonder kind of, what this does for the morale, what this does in terms of, will the players always go all out, or whatever, different psychological factors come into play when you talk about, dealing with your team. But, we've seen players, especially you look at Myles Garrett earlier this offseason, demand a trade. And then, oh, by the way, he got this huge contract, and that trade talk went away. So there's that possibility for Micah Parsons, and I think that's probably the hope for Cowboys fans.
A man that you mentioned that knows all about the business side of things and also the Dallas and Jerry Jones side of things is Dak Prescott. And a lot of eyebrows are raised this offseason when the Cowboys not only moved on from Mike McCarthy, but decided to name Brian Schottenheimer as McCarthy's successor at head coach. JB, what's the comfort level that you think that Dak Prescott has with Schottenheimer, and how has Schottenheimer acclimated himself to Dallas early in this process?
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of helps this transition for Brian Schottenheimer, who's never been a head coach before, is the fact that he was in the room with Dak Prescott and he worked under Mike McCarthy. So there's a familiarity just based on the fact that they work together. Now, Schottenheimer walking into this role, I think we saw something last week in practice when he canceled practice. Well, he stopped practice short because there were a series of fights that just really got under his skin, and he made the players run wind sprints and then just called off practice after giving them a few, expletive laced messages along the way. And so I think he's definitely had an opportunity already to show that he is the man in charge. But in Dallas, that only goes so far because you've got Jerry at the top commanding all the attention, Jerry at the top who doesn't hesitate to weigh in on whatever the matters are, be it especially when you talk about the business matters. But, you've always got that shadow that you have to deal with as a Cowboys coach. Now, some coaches, that's no problem. Some coaches, and look at Schottenheimer, much like Jason Garrett years ago, first time as a head coach, well, you kind of, you want to be in this spot, so you deal with that. You look at Bill Parcells, on the other hand, who was closer to Jimmy Johnson in temperament, if you will, as a coach who had been there, done that. And so, there was a line kind of drawn with those coaches, those experienced winning coaches. And Brian Schottenheimer is not that guy. And so can he win? It's going to, all depend on getting positioned for the playoffs and then what happens in the playoffs. But, we've seen this story before with a new coach coming to the Cowboys, a talented team, and how far can they go?